Give everybody a moment to come back in. I believe we are at that order of business of bills on third reading. And do you have a privilege? Okay. Oh, very good. You want, okay, perfect. Yeah. All right. Sorry, we're trying to get coordinated here. We're going to do one more bill, and then we're going to have a little event before we go through the rest of the bills. So the next bill for our consideration is Senate File 84. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 84, sponsored by Senator Ellis. Education, model student attendance policies, an act relating to education being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Let's see, Representative Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move Second Amendment reading number 2 to House Senate File 84 and ask for your favorable consideration. Mr. Speaker, what this amendment does is that it changes the second sentence of the part of the bill that requires school districts to have a policy allowing parents to request pre-approved absences. I had asked them to just delete the whole paragraph here and reinsert it so you could all read it all together rather than having to decipher the amendment. But I came to this after talking to quite a few interested parties, and there was some concern that with the existing language that we might require all schools to get the teacher directly involved with the absence policy, and there might be a lot of complications with that. This specifically turns it into a may provision. So a pre-approved absence may include input by a student's teachers and may require advanced coursework, so on. So we leave everything as a may. It seems like everyone believes, including the association that represents the school boards, that there is enough room for local control for schools to adopt and create their own policy while still requiring that they do in fact have a policy where parents can request these absences, and also not requiring that any absence be specifically approved. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say I really appreciate this amendment, and I really appreciate the bringer of the amendment working with me so much to draft this language. And I think this is exactly what we were both trying to get to. Kind of the issue when you start drafting an amendment in committee by hand and trying to read it into a bill doesn't quite work out the way it does. This amendment gets to exactly what we were both trying to get to. So on and for the amendment, and then I think it helps a lot of people with this bill as it goes forward as well. So thank you.
Anybody else wish to comment? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? All right, question having been called, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 84 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 84 has been adopted. Chairman Northrup.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 84, and we'll remove it at the appropriate time. So in the world of education, I'm going to say that our committee probably screwed up. We shouldn't have let that come out saying a teacher, you shouldn't go to the teacher. The building principal is the one who's in charge of the building. Teachers do lesson plans. Teachers make sure that you get your work put together. But when you want to get an excused absence, you go to the building, you go to the administrator of that building and ask for that. So all this turns into then is a bunch of busy work for the state superintendent. She has to build another pathway. She has to put this stuff together, or their designee. And then you don't have necessarily the, what good does it do? It says may be used. It's just busy work. Also, we tried to put some sideboards into it. The mental health issue came into play, and 5 days before that come out, now it's going to be, mental health will be turned into the newest way to get out of school for parents. They're going to say, my child needs to have time to recover from the kitten's death, or whatever it is. And so they're just looking, it's just another way for the kids to get out of school. If we're going to be serious about kids being in school, they really just need to be in school. We should talk about mandatory times. We should talk about other things that are involved in education and how to get kids to stay in school longer, whether or not it's CTE or whatever the case may be. But I'm just saying that I think that this bill has morphed through the 6 amendments, and one of them failed. So we put 5 amendments onto this bill, and I just think it's morphed into an outrageous creation right now, and I'm asking for you to kill this bill and vote no.
Representative Andrew for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, on and against the amendment and for the bill. Just to review, this bill does 3 things. The first thing this bill does is require the state superintendent to draft a model attendance policy. This policy is helpful to school districts throughout the state, especially small school districts, because they have something out there to look to that they can craft to their own needs. But it's a starting point. It also helps parents have something that they can use as a model policy to bring to their school boards and say, here's a model policy, I like this part of it, could we consider adopting this and bringing it into our school district? So it helps those 2 groups. The second thing it does is it requires that mental health be a reason for an excused absence. Health is already in there, but that is up to interpretation, and that's been interpreted in school districts in Wyoming, as we heard in testimony, that mental health is not part of the current statute. So we specifically add mental health in this bill. The third part of this bill is that it adds a requirement that schools at least have a policy that if a parent requests an unexcused absence, that request will be considered. It does not require it to be approved. And Mr. Chairman, or Speaker, this, and the last part of this bill, as I said previously, leaves it open to local control, exactly how that policy is written. And it was not considered to be too intrusive. I think it's also an important part of Article 7, Section 1 in the Constitution, which requires a complete and uniform system of education. It helps us get to that goal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Berger for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm for this amendment and against this bill. And and here's the reason why. One, where the bill came from a large district. And it came from parents who were taking their kids on big trips, whose kids aren't habitual absent. They're not absent all the time, or a lot of the time, and they're not habitual absenteeism. And they're just were upset because they were getting a letter from the district saying, hey, your child's been out for 5 to 10 days. Well, that's normal procedure. That's normal. That's what all districts do. You're going to get the letter anyways. And they're not worried about those kids and those parents who take their kids. Now the bill is turned into more mental health and starting to kind of address the habitual absenteeism that's going on in our school districts. It's not there yet. it still needs to be studied. There's a lot of work to do with habitual absenteeism, and it needs to be really put together and studied. And I am not for this. There still needs to be local control. This is a bill that came from a big district. I did not hear from the little districts. My district, we're doing the right things. We just see it as adding the mental health. Now it gives another tool in the tool belt for those habitual absentee kids. And we don't want that tool for them. We've got to get them attracted and back in school and giving them options to come into school and why it's so important to be there. Or in the end, when they're adults, the price tag goes really high if we don't educate them, right? So this bill is not there yet. I'm against this bill, and that's why. Thanks.
Representative Davis for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, we're trying to build a one-size-fits-all for the state of Wyoming. And my particular school districts over there, they feel they have a best communication and feeling for what's going on within their school district. The teachers, the parents can come to their school board and they can get these things worked out. They do not currently see where there's an issue. So once again, I'm against the bill. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Northrop. Oh, Andrew, sorry, Andrew would, okay. Representative Andrew, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to emphasize that this bill allows full local control, but for the fact that you at least have to have a policy for this. This is not from one particular district. I've heard concerns, I've seen concerns from multiple districts, and this is not important just to people who want to take big trips. This could be important for a parent to request an excused absence for some portion of the hunting season, or for something important to our ranching industry. All of that is important. All of that is educational. Parents should have the ability to request an absence for that. All this stuff should be considered, and then the school can make their own decision. This does not promote habitual absenteeism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Anybody else for their second time before the sponsor? Chairman Northrop.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So here we are. We're back to making model policy. We're asking the superintendent to do it with a may on it. Your district may adopt it. Well, if your district's is doing what they should be doing, they've already got this policy. There's a few districts that maybe they have chose not to adopt it. And so you can already go to the building principal. You as a parent can go and ask and get that excused absenteeism if you so choose. So here we are, we're putting in more local control in quotes because now the district may be able to adopt that, but districts already have if they just choose to do it. So that's why I'm saying is that this bill has just no legs to grow on. There's no teeth in it. There's nothing there. Let's just do away with it and be done with it. On and against the bill. And Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, I respectfully withdraw this amendment at this time.
All right, third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 84 has been withdrawn. Senate File 84 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Excused? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Plouston? Conrad? Crago, Davis, Eklund, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Warnock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrop, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Henn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stith, Storr, Strock, excused, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Swanitzer Dan, Swanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 20 aye, 38 no, 4 excused.
Senate File 84, having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 84 has failed to pass the House. Privilege of the floor, Representative Haroldson,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege.
please.
So when my little girl was 7 years old, she came to us one day and she said, "Dad, I really want to play violin." And when your 7-year-old says, you want to play violin? She goes, "Oh yeah, definitely." And I thought, well, okay. So I went and bought the cheapest violin I could find and thought this soon shall pass. And pretty soon I realized that that was the wrong decision. And I couldn't wait for her to grow a little bit to get her out of that. That was 4 violins ago. And today we have the privilege of being able to hear my daughter play a piece for us this morning. And so I did invite Elena to come on out. Elena just turned 15, and today she got her learner's permit. So if you could pray for me, I'd appreciate it. But Elena Haroldson.
Good afternoon, guys. Today I'm going to be playing an accolade concerto in A minor. It is 2 movements, so I would appreciate if you held your applause to the end. So I hope you guys enjoy.
Wow, that was extraordinary. What a treat. Representative Crago, do you have a privilege?
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor.
Please.
Mr. Speaker, I have the distinct privilege today of introducing our E-2022 WWAMI class. If you look to the south balcony, I'm going to ask them to stand up one at a time. I'll read their names because you're going to recognize a lot of them. They're all from our hometowns. And so as I introduce you, please stand and be recognized. Shayna Bauer from Thermopolis. Trent Bronnenberg from Cody. Ross Cook from Lander. Jenny Eppisberger from Powell. Aaron Erickson from Cody. Braden Fusner from Cody. Cale Hinkle from Lander. Caleb Hoops from my part of the country, Sheridan. Hiram Lopkin from Level. Daphne Ma from Cheyenne. Hannah Mills from Powell. Casey Pickla from Lander. Franklin Powell from Jackson. Madeline Prince from here in Cheyenne. Andrew Quinn from Bighorn. Thomas Robitaille from Casper. Mackenzie Stampley from Cheyenne. Heidi Taggart from Jackson. Galen Tribble from Cody. And Andrew White from Bighorn.
Representative Crago.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to point out that these are our doctors and healthcare providers of the future, and I thank them for being here today.
Yeah. Thank you to the WWAMI program and for all of you guys that are going to help out a lot of people in your lives. Thank you. And welcome to the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 87.
Senate File 87, sponsored by Senator Cooper. Natural resource funding, large project threshold increase. An act relating to the administration of government being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 for Senate File 87 and ask for your favorable consideration. And the Senate file, of course, is fairly simple. So as most of you know, it basically just raised the limits on the authorization for major projects. I'm just proposing basically cutting that from 400 down to 300, putting it in the middle. I'm just recommending at this point that we take a little bit more of a graceful rise, not maybe cutting it to the bone, because I know this probably has been here for many years, but opening this up for conversation in this area. But anyway, I would propose that just proposing we bring it back maybe to 300, give us an opportunity, more of an opportunity to overlook those programs. I know a lot of those programs are very large, most of them, probably many of them in the millions, so they won't fall into this category, but some of those ones on the lower end, I'm just bringing the cap down to, I'm recommending bringing the cap down to 300 instead of being up at 400. And I just ask for your favorable consideration on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Western, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ordinarily, I would rise in support of this amendment if it weren't for the fact that this limit was set at the inception of the fund in 2005. So we're talking almost 20 years. And think about the increase of costs that have gone up in those 20 years. The price of concrete has tripled. Concrete that we need for these overpasses and underpasses that the fund helps build. The price of fencing, all these different types of things, man hour, all those things have increased double, triple, quadruple in certain situations. And so I certainly appreciate the intent, but at the end of the day, we want to allow this agency and this fund to do the projects that we need them to do. And so that's why I think the level it was set at is necessary. Again, it's been almost 20 years. if it was just a couple of years, that's one thing, but given it's been nearly 20, I think that it's time to set it at where it is currently written in the bill. So on and against, please vote no.
Representative Provenza for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last speaker had some great points, and I don't want to belabor the point so much, but that 2005, when we made this, I mean, it made sense then, and I think with inflation the way it is now, we know that just the pure flat inflation rate would get us to $308,000. So why did we ask for 400? Because it wasn't just an arbitrary number that we just threw out of nowhere and, let's do this. Part of what it was is that the inflation rate might not just cover what these expenses are. So we know that in the past few years, we've seen different types of inflation change. So the cost of a certain pesticide that starts with re and ends with juvra is as much as 5 times more than the former chemical that was used, and it's more effective. Additionally, we're talking about things like aviation fuel, diesel for equipment for forest health and river projects, concrete for river and irrigation infrastructure. So there's specifics about these types of large projects that are going to have an inflationary rate that's higher than what just that flat rate is. So if you care about the grass that cheats and it's given you a heck of a time in your area of the state, which I've seen the detrimental effects, then this is something you want that can be handled sooner rather than later. And that's a big part of why we brought this legislation. So in addition, when we write legislation, we shouldn't be writing legislation so we can come amend it in 2 years. If we bring it to the rate that's suggested in this amendment, we're just going to be back. We haven't done this for 18 years. Let's try and think in the future so that we can not come back every couple of years and have the same conversation. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Davis for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, this is a great agency doing extremely valuable work for Wyoming. And it's one of the few agencies that takes the intent of the severance tax and puts it back to work for Wyoming in the forms of water, natural resources there, wildlife habitat. So I don't think that there's any misuse here, and let alone the dollars that they get to match these funds off the private sector. It's a win-win deal. Thanks.
Representative Hornock for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This seems to me just a question of whether or not we want to have some oversight over this group. These people bring the projects and they present them in the interim and they go through them. It seems like it's fairly reasonable to want to have some scrutiny over these projects. I think this is a decent amendment. I'm still not convinced that it's a necessary bill even, because most of the projects that half the projects in that bill do fall in this category, I think. So I do believe that it's a good idea for us to keep seeing these projects, keep the oversight over these projects, and understand what this department's doing. Thank you.
Representative Byron for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against, the body needs to remember that these are already vetted by members of this House. They're vetted by folks down the hall. They're also vetted by a board that are your neighbors and people all around the state. So I think this is a well overdue change. Like I said, on and against, and please yes on the bill.
Representative Larson for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would agree with the previous couple of speakers and would suggest that we defeat this amendment. I think to a previous speaker's comment, the question perhaps we ought to ask is, has there been mischief in the past? Has there been anything with the current level of oversight or raising it that would give us cause to pause or say, boy, we can't do that. This board of appointees has taken the funding to these conservation projects well outside the realm of what we expected, and I would argue that you're not going to be able to find that. So if they prove themselves, and I think that allowing them the flexibility to continue to take these smaller projects that are now 400,000 and less and move forward with their authority to approve them allows them to get out faster and quicker, be a little more nimble. Now remember, in there's another section where we have an additional 200. We raise it from 100,000 to 200,000, that if they get into a project, it's kind of almost a change order authority, that if they get into a project and identify some things that were not anticipated through the engineering and other things, that then they can supplement the cost of those approved projects up to another $100,000. And we do have oversight in this body. We have members of our House and the Senate that serve on this committee. This bill is being brought to us by the chairman of the committee on the Senate side that has oversight over these projects. And so I think if our concern there really is that that there's mischief, I would argue that I've not seen any evidence of that in my 10 years, and would encourage you to defeat this amendment and to support the bill.
Representative Storer for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just add to the previous comments as well that what the board does when it meets is a public process. The public is invited and encouraged to participate. Often there are on-site field trips to see where the project's going to take place. And so there really is a lot of oversight for these kinds of projects. The bill actually just essentially encourages, continues the status quo by raising the figures, by doubling those figures that we have. So on and against the amendment. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time? Representative Davis for your second time.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, on these projects, oftentimes they're working with other agencies, sometimes the foundation the agency may be the lead, but most generally it's a bunch of agencies coming together in the best interest of that project. So it's quite a coalition that is put together when these projects are going forth out there.
Anybody else for their second time? Representative Locke?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me dispel one concern. I'm definitely not proposing that there has been mischief in this process. But what I am just throwing out is that I do think that a more graceful increase in the amounts that we do here. I realize it has been many years, but that being said, I still recommend a more graceful approach to this. And that's where this amendment was aimed. And again, thank you for your time. And I'd like to, I'd ask for your eye on this amendment. Thank you.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 87 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 87 has failed. Division having been called, all those in favor, please stand. All those opposed, please stand. More than 21. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 87 has failed. Senate File 87 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown, Burkhart, Byron, Chadwick, Chestick, Clauston, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Harrelson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrup, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stiff, Storr, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Swan and Sir Dan, Swan and Sir Dave, Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Smith? Oh, sorry. Any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 46 aye, 16 no.
Senate File 87, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 87 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 106.
Senate File 106, sponsored by Natural Resource Funding. 2023 Large Project Funding. An act relating to the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Funding Act being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have an amendment. Representative Bear, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully withdraw third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 106.
Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 106 has been withdrawn. Senate File 106, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand, Allred, Andrew, Angelos, Banks, Bear, Berger, Brown, Burkhart, Byron, Chadwick, Chestick, Clauston, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Harrelson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hornock, Jennings, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Locke, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Nemec, Northrup, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Pendergraft, Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stiff, Storr, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Mr. Dan? Mr. Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Jennings? Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 50 aye, 12 no.
Senate File 106, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 106 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 102.
Senate File 102, sponsored by Senator Salazar. Food Freedom Act amendments, an act relating to marketing homemade foods being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Representative Yen.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 102 and ask for your favorable consideration. So members, I went home for the first time during a session this last weekend, and I went to our Winters Farmers Market. So every Saturday we have a Winters Farmers Market. I met a farmer from Smoot, and she was selling cheeses, very delicious cheeses. She had a little disclaimer saying made under the Food Freedom Act. And so I was like, that's great. It's great to see policies that we pass in this House actually making a difference for folks around the state. And she told me, though, that there was an issue where she's, through the current Food Freedom Act, she's can't actually slice the cheese and package the cheese at the farmer's market itself. So the health department ended up telling her that she had to pull a temporary food license if she wanted to do that. And so she tried to do that, pull a temporary food license, and they told her that she needs a creamery plant number, a USDA approved creamery plant. So she basically got stuck in a catch-22 where there's literally no way for her to cut and package cheese at the farmer's market. And so the situation she ends up finding herself in is she has to cut various sizes of cheese, package them all at home, and then hope people will want to buy that specific size of cheese that she's pre-packaged at her home from cheese made through the Food Freedom Act. So I told her, you know, lucky for you, we actually have a bill open right now on the Food Freedom Act that deals with dairy products. So maybe this is a problem that we could actually get solved. So I drafted this amendment. I actually reached out to both my county health department as well as the agency in the state of Wyoming that handles agriculture. And they said the language of the bill does read like it'll capture that intent that I'm trying to get at. They didn't, because literally it just happened over this weekend, and then I reached out to the department this morning. They haven't been able to reach an attorney general's opinion, but there is time for us to deal with it if for some reason it is conflicting. But basically, the intention here is to allow that catch-22 to no longer happen so that farmers or other folks who are making dairy products can still slice and package their cheese at the farmer's market, because it's really silly that they're not able to. So I do ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Walters for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment. And the biggest reason is I fear that by listing, including slicing, weighing, packaging of those items without adding some language, but not limited to or something to that effect, we could actually unintentionally limit it to those being the only things that can occur. And so that makes this actually more restricting than what's in the law. And if you go read the law, there's nothing that says minimal handling of these foods can take place currently. So what I think is occurring is we might have a rogue, or I shouldn't say rogue, but we might have a misinterpretation of the law occurring in one county, and now we're going to put this in the books that I fear could actually restrict it further than we've ever intended. So again, I would ask for a no vote on the amendment. I think we have a great law in place. I think what we're doing in the existing bill enhances that already, and there shouldn't be this confusion. And I think this can be handled quite frankly through the department, just to make sure that their locals are enforcing it as intended, as opposed to as they deem to interpret locally. So again, on and against the amendment. Thank you.
Chairman Zwanitzer for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question. Can I now milk a cow on site and sell that in front of the consumer, assuming there's no other health laws about having my dairy cow right there at the farmer's market with me and packaging that product in front of the consumer.
Anybody else for their first time? Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, and I think I'm opposed to it too. And the reason is the bill was brought to tighten up what we do in food freedom. And it was very specific about what we can and can't do. And we've got some of those laws in place. We do, especially with eggs, we think we're where we need to be with those. And those are brought into this. So I would oppose this. The only reason we would want to do this is pass it and then try to repair whatever we're damaging in the intent of the bill. But I would say I would oppose this amendment.
Chairman Newsom for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a former meat inspector, I take issue with weighing on a scale that may or may not be documented to be accurate. And so I kind of have a problem with that piece, is there is no language that says that the scales have to be documented to be weighing accurately. Thank you.
Anybody else? Representative Pendergraft for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the amendment. Anytime we add freedom, I'm for it. And we go to farmers markets all the time. And I don't care what the cheese weighs. And I ought to be able to cut it. Where do we think we have the right to get in the way of one person making a trade with another person? No.
Representative Banks for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the amendment, I tend to agree with my good friend from Matrona County. When we start to list what you can and can't do, I see it as a restriction of freedom. What we had in the bill was worked. It's popular in opinion. That's what we want to keep it as, is what you go to as a farmer. I can see an inspector showing up and say, well, this isn't listed down by word what you can and can't do. I don't think that we should start to go down that road. So I would urge a no vote on this amendment, and let's keep the bill as it is. Thank you.
Representative Berger for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm both for and against this amendment. I'm just kind of wondering if we need to tell people where they can cut the cheese and where they can't cut the cheese, outside or inside. I mean, anyways, I kind of like this bill and like this amendment. So, yeah, doesn't stink either.
Representative Haraldson for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I guess a question that I do want to ask is, under the current statute, if this passes, are they protected? Are we adding this in for no reason, or does this need to be in there? And I think that's really the question we have to ask ourselves. Is this already taken care of, and we do have a health inspector that needs to have a conversation and just brought up to speed with where we're at, or do we need this type of prescriptive language in there? So if you could answer that, is this kind of like a just to make sure that they understand type concept, or is this a situation where this is truly not protected? The other thing that you have to understand, you guys, it's a farmer's market, and we have them in our community. Probably every one of us have them in our community. So I think we need to be very careful that I've never gone in there and went, man alive, I bought 6 cucumbers and 2 of those looked a little smaller than what I thought they should be, and I'm gonna have to go back and get a refund on those. It's a farmer's market. And so, my wife sold stuff at the farmer's market. And so I think that we need to be careful. Do we want dishonest scales at a farmer's market? No. But at the same time, I don't think anyone's going to sit there and go, oh my goodness, I got shorted 2 ounces on my cheese today. So I think we need to be careful that when we're opening this up, we don't put too much prescriptive language in there that could be a handcuffs, but at the same time, if this is not protected, let's do that. And at the end of the day, we don't want the government in here. We want to allow farmers to sell to families.
Representative Davis for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, sometimes I think we try to overthink this stuff too much. I mean, we're just in an agreement here that I will give you this in exchange for that, whether it's sliced or packaged or wrapped in a piece of paper. I think that's the simplicity of a farmer's market. So if this amendment makes that easier, I'm for the amendment.
Representative Brown for your first time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am just here to say, I think the good former speaker who just said what he said is exactly what we've heard. And then to the good representative from the northern part of the Laramie County here, that we actually have an exact issue here, right? We had somebody who went home on their weekend trip and said, hey, look, this law is not working for me because I have somebody, a particular individual, who is reading the law that says this. Now, I can also agree with the representative from the center part of the state that says maybe we just go have a discussion with that individual, because when we put something in the green books, it can potentially cause us some serious issues as well. I'm going to support the amendment because I think that what we're looking at here is, I do see the consternation and the potential of this being a pitfall more than anything else. But I think this is what we do. We go back home on our weekends, we hear from our constituents, and we hear that something just isn't working the way that it was supposed to be. And I applaud the bringer of the amendment trying to fix an issue that he saw at home. So on and for.
Anybody else? Representative Ottman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment. While I believe it's a great idea to go home and to talk to our constituents, and while this is help there, this bill is a good little bill, and we want to make sure that the citizens in this fine state have the opportunity to have free food freedom. But what I want to say is that it has been worked. It has been looked over by the department that takes care of our agriculture, and they're happy with the bill. So what I would say is, in the conversations that we've had over the last few months, is that we have 23 counties here. We have a lot of employees that work for this department, and I believe that we just need to get the bill out, to get the information out to the different people that work in this, and let them know that these things are not a problem, and let them handle it locally and let them handle it well. So I would say no on the amendment and aye on the bill. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Chairman Eklund for your second time.
Mr. Speaker, and I do believe the amendment is intended to help the bill, but I'm just not sure that it does, and I remain opposed to the amendment. Words do make a difference. We start inserting may when most of the law has shall in it, and I think it just puts a question mark in the inspector's mind as to what he can and can't do, what is permissive and what isn't permissive, and I think that that's part of the problem with the amendment. If we were to pass the amendment, I think we would have to at least fix that word, and maybe more, because I'm not sure there is a problem. Again, it's hard to say, but I've not heard of this problem anywhere else in the state, so I'm not sure we want to be specific to one inspector either.
Anybody else for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, on and against the amendment. This law has been in place since 2015. This activity has taken place at farmers markets, farmer market, retail type stores. Since then, This issue has not came up. People have been selling cheese, doing these sorts of things with no issue until in one county in the last 6 months, an issue has arisen, which would lead me down the road of thinking that maybe somebody is misinterpreting what this law can do. By adding this, again, as I stated earlier, I think we put more restriction on what is available instead of less, because we start to list out what they can and can't do. And it hasn't been a problem since 2015 until in one location in one county in the last 6 months. So I don't think we have a problem. Again, I'd vote no on the bill, on the amendment, and yes on the bill. Thank you.
Anybody else? Representative Yin for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So to answer some questions, does this allow milking cows at the farmer's market? No, it's specific to dairy products. The dairy product doesn't exist if it hasn't been produced. The issue of whether is this necessary or is it covered by the bill? So that was some of the discussion that I had with the agency that handles agriculture. And so I forwarded the email that has a result of that discussion. And from a plain reading of the bill, of the language that already exists, is that slicing is still part of the processing part of making cheese. And so without having the explicit language, you still would not be able to slice at the farmer's market. And with the issue of whether this hamstrings, we have lots of places in law where we start listing out including, and that's just to make sure that people know at least those things. It doesn't make it exclusive of everything else. We have lots of places in law where we understand what handling means. This just makes sure that slicing is considered handling with regards to having those dairy products at the farmer's market so they can package it and sell it to their own constituents. And so, again, I think this is necessary. I have voted for all the Food Freedom Acts so far. I'm in favor of this one too. I just want to make sure that we can solve this problem now while we're in session, instead of waiting a year or maybe 2 years if we can't do it in a following session, if this continues to be a problem. So I'll ask you to adopt the amendment and vote aye on the bill.
Question having been called, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 102 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 102 has been adopted. Division having been called, all those in favor, please rise. It was a loud group, I guess. All those opposed, please rise. All right, thank you. Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 102 has failed, 28 to 30. Senate File 102 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Warnock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwonitzer Dan. Zwonitzer Dave. Speaker Summers.
Aye.
Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 62 aye.
Senate File 102, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 102 has passed the House. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have, I need to sign House Bill 1. So we're going to be at enrolled acts for one bill. And so the next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 37, being original House Bill 1. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act 37 being original House Bill 1. An act relating to supplemental appropriations for the operation of state government for the fiscal biennium commencing July 1st, 2022 and ending June 30th, 2024. Providing definitions, providing for additional appropriations and transfer of funds for the period of the budget, increasing or decreasing specified amounts, adjusting the number of positions, modifying prior appropriations, providing for duties, terms and conditions, and other requirements relating to appropriations for the period of the budget as specified, providing for position and other budgetary limitations, amending existing law by redirecting revenues and making transfers for the period of the budget, providing for carryover of funds beyond the fiscal biennium, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 37, being original House Bill number 1. I have so signed. All right. Representative Ward, do you have a motion?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to suspend Rule 4-7B and refer Senate File 117, which is Parental Rights in Education, to Committee Number 5, Agriculture. This bill has been in the Speaker's desk for 24 days, and our constituents have been asking us what the status is. The issue
There
of...
is no debating that right now.
Okay.
Till I figure out whether you can debate that right now.
Yes, sir.
So just a second. So, Chief? All right, according to Masons, motions to suspend rules yields to all privileged motions, appeals, A motion to suspend rules cannot be amended, debated, laid upon the table, or referred to committee or postponed. So it cannot be debated. And that is on page 217, section 282 of Masons. So if you have all heard the motion, does
Mr.
it
Speaker?
does the suspension of the rules does it require any seconds?
That was my question.
I don't think it does. So no, it doesn't show it in Masons. So I don't believe it requires any seconds. Sorry, we're in the middle of a motion that's non-debatable. So we are going to proceed on this motion. Just a second. I got two rules people coming up here. Okay. So after consulting Masons on page 216 under 282, you have the right as the mover to suspend to explain why you want to suspend the rule.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, Senate File 117, also called Parental Rights in Education, has been in the Speaker's desk for 24 days. Our constituents have been asking what the status of the bill is. The issue of parental rights in education is clearly prominent in our time.
No, we're not going to debate that. We're just going to talk about why you believe it should be pulled out of the drawer. And you believe it should be pulled out because it's been in my desk for so many days. We're not going to debate the merits of the bill.
It's been in the Speaker's desk for 24 days. I do also ask for a recorded vote on my motion, according to Rule 12.4.
So a recorded vote, does that require seconds? I think it usually, see three, I think there's three. Bear, Slagle, Stivar. All right. On the motion to pull Senate File 117 out of the Speaker's desk, Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermueller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
No.
Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 27 aye, 34 no.
By your vote, you have voted to not suspend the rule and pull rule number 4-7 and pull Senate File 117 from the Speaker's desk. Are there any other motions? Okay, we are now at that order of business of request to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill. The first message, let's see, the first thing I'm going to do is appoint a conference committee. So the conference committee on Senate File number 51 will be Harshman Chair, Lawley, Northrup. The first message for our consideration is message number 359 on House Bill 22. Yep. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, I move message number 359 to House Bill 22. This is the state land leasing deficiencies in the cure process. Body, when we described this process, we had hoped to insert in policy for state lands to be able to exert a certain amount of grace in problems that arise during renewal of different leases. And I guess I had this conversation with my vice chair about the difficulty of understanding statute language. It's like a foreign language sometimes. The Senate had the same problem over there and decided to rewrite the bill. And I think it's rewritten properly, but it's a substitute bill. I would prefer that we vote no on this concurrence and go over and with the committee and research as much as we can that the bill does do what we originally planned for it to do. So I'd appreciate a no vote on this.
Sensing your urge to vote, we are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 22. A majority of elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Brown? Excused? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Plouston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Warnock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermueller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storr? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Swanitzer Dan? Swanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? No. Are there any changes? Singh? No to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 2 aye, 59 no, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to not concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 22. Conference committee will be Crago, Davis, Eklund, Chair. The next message for our consideration is message number 323 on House Bill 93. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, body, we are on the, I move message number 323 to House Bill 93, the omnibus water bill construction. And body, I would ask for a no vote on this. It changed drastically after it left here. Some of the changes I don't mind that much, but I think we'd all as a body probably agree and disagree with some of the changes. One of them, if you look through the amended, whatever, 4 or 5 pages of amendments here, just because it changed that much, we need to go over there and have a conversation. The amount that we scrapped for $30 million in savings in account 3, and they inserted $75 million. That doesn't bother me that much, but it will bother some on this body. Then the Board of Control was inserted, the planning bill, which is a different, the omnibus water bill planning, had an amendment that would strip the Board of Control away from water development and put it back where many of us believe it belongs, which is with the state engineer's office. They administrate that program. And it should be funded out of general fund dollars and not water development dollars. Those are my opinions, and others would disagree with that. Part of why we should go over there and have a conversation about it. And That's more of the same. There's some love-hate things on this. Some people love it and some don't, but it's different parts. They stripped out cloud seeding. We had a long conversation about it. As most of you know, I favor cloud seeding. When I first got here, you had to wonder why we would build dams and reservoirs or expand them, because we couldn't seem to fill the system we had. Because of cloud seeding, we were able we've kept that system fairly full, and we can probably justify building new reservoirs. So I'd like to go have the conversation and have that inserted back in. And I'm trying to think if I've got everything. I believe there is, well, I don't see what I was thinking of, but there's enough to go over there and talk about that I would ask for a no vote on this concurrence.
We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 93. Majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Ellerman? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Excused? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Harrelson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrop? Oakley? Obermueller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Swanser Dan? Swanser Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Allemand? No to aye. Brown, excused to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 3 aye, 59 no.
By your vote, you have voted to not concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 93. The conference committee will be Crago, Walters, Larson, Lloyd, Chair. The next message for our consideration is message number 362 on House Bill 101. Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move message number 362 and encourage the body to vote for concurrence. Our counterparts down the hall simply included a clarifying word of distribution to define the types of decisions that were being addressed in the bill. Inserting one word, good addition. Please vote aye.
Mic on. We're voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 101. A majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Warnock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 59 aye, 3 no.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 101. The next message for our consideration is message number 363 on House Bill 118. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Excuse me. I move concurrence with message 363 on House Bill 118. Ladies and gentlemen, what this does is when that bill left here, that's the volunteer firefighter pension funding bill. We had reduced the appropriation to down to 4.5 million. Our friends down the hall increased it back to the 9 million. When it left here, we had pretty strong support for our position. So I would suggest we vote no, go down the hall and see what they had planned. So I ask for your no vote.
Chairman Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to disagree with my good friend, Chairman of Minerals, and say that this was the bill as it was originally designed, was to have the 9 million in it. And the Senate put that back. And so I would suggest that we vote for concurrence on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would agree with my good friend from Park County. The bill might have had overwhelming support from this body when it left here, but when I talked to my constituents from the volunteer firefighters, it was overwhelmingly supported to keep the bill as it was original. So I would urge I vote to concur. This is a small token that we can give back to our volunteer firefighters who don't get salary, who don't get much. So I would vote to concur with the Senate and bring this back to what our volunteer firefighters requested. Thank you.
Representative Stiff for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, I request a no vote on concurrence. Putting additional money into it doesn't change any volunteer firefighters' actual benefits. It's just the year at which it becomes 100% funded. And if you may recall, we had voted 3 to 58 to, with a similar proposal just a few days ago. So please vote no.
Representative Oakley for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There have been a couple things about our voting. I guess would like to remind the body that originally we had the 9 million appropriation stripped it, and we resisted that. So actually there was support for us to maintain our position at 9 million with this body, and then they came back and cut it in half, and we capitulated, which I don't think we should have. So I think we should stick with the 9, vote aye.
Representative Larson Lloyd for your first time.
Thank you. And I think you'll recall that as we fleshed out the conversation on the 9 million, there was some misunderstanding that we had somehow taken $9 million from the retirement fund to fund Plan A, which never occurred. This is a diversion. We diverted some of the fire insurance premium money over to help fund the Plan A. The volunteer firemen account, or their plan is more fully funded than the big plan in the state employment pool. And then we come back out of the generosity of our hearts and compromised at 4.5 million, and felt that was because they're not underfunded. And so I would encourage a no vote. Let's go down there and wrestle those guys and see what we can do.
Representative Stivar for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the concurrence. Wyoming statute 93454, plans shall be managed and maintained their actual funding ratio at or above 100% throughout the life of the plan. So on and for the concurrence.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody for their second time? Chairman Burkhart, do you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and body. I think that's the best debate we've had on one of these concurrences to date. So I'd say, I'd still like to go down the hall and talk to the people down there, see what they had in mind. So vote your conscience.
We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 118. A majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Larson JT, can you repeat? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Swanitzer Dan? Swanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Allemand, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 31 aye, 31 no.
By your vote, you have voted to not concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 118. Just a second. Conference Committee on 118 is Newsom chair, Stivar Provenza. The next message for our consideration is message number 367 on House Bill 180. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, I move message 367 on House Bill 180. This is brucellosis testing and notification requirements. Body, I visited with the sponsor and we talked about the amendment that was made on the other side. It removes a sentence on page 3, and that probably tightens up the bill. And we would ask for an aye vote on concurrence.
We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 180. The majority of elected members is required. The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Warnock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 62 aye.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 180. The next message for our consideration is message number 377 on House Bill 100. Chairman Harshman. Chairman Harshman, it's message number 377.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and move message 377, concurrence on House Bill 100. This is a bill from the good representative from Sheridan County on acquisition value study. The Senate, or our partners down the hall made a couple amendments, ran those by the sponsor. He's good with them. I don't think it harms the bill. Pushes the date out a little bit and adds a little more sideboard to the study. So the good sponsor of the bill and myself would urge aye vote on concurrence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 100. A majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Warnock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Sherwood, Singh, Slagle, Smith, Stith, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Trujillo, Walters, Ward, Washut, Western, Winter, Wiley, Yin, Zwanitzer Dan, Zwanitzer Dave, Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 60 aye, 2 no.
We're, by your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 100. Representative Olson, I think I'm kind of done with concurrences, so I think we'll move to your motion. Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On February 13th, 2023, this body voted not to concur in Senate amendments to House Bill 47 pursuant to Mason's Section 480 through 483 and the past practice of this House. I move to rescind the action of the House in not concurring to the Senate amendments to House Bill 47.
Okay, that motion appears to be in order. Here's how we will proceed. We will first vote on the question of rescinding the previous action of the House in not concurring to the Senate amendments to House Bill 47. If that motion passes, we will then take a second vote on the original motion to concur to the Senate amendments on House Bill 47. And so, does anybody have any questions on that? So it's much like a reconsideration. So we make a motion to rescind, and then we're back on the original question of the concurrence. So the question is, should the House rescind its previous action in not concurring to the Senate amendments to House Bill 47? The chief clerk will please call.
Ellerman,
Oh, I'm supposed to allow debate. Sorry, chief, back up. So I can allow debate. Chairman Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll take this opportunity to give some context to why we're rescinding. So we originally, I asked for your non-concurrence so that we could go down the hall and meet with our Senate counterparts and figure out what was processing through their minds when they passed the standing committee that they did. We met with them today. Our committee met, and we met for, oh gosh, it was nearly an hour, 45, 50 minutes, and we did not reach a conclusion but for to have potentially another meeting. What we did learn, though, during that meeting is a better understanding of the Senate amendment. We heard testimony from our association that represents our county clerks, and we heard different testimony than what we had heard on the House side when we passed our standing committee amendment. Particularly what this bill deals with is rules that exist in the office that oversees our state elections, and the codification of certain rules as they deal specifically with federal certification of voting machines. What we learned is that the Senate took out 2 of those rules that were being codified in the statutes. And what we learned from our clerks was that they are adamantly opposed to the codification of those 2 rules. In fact, what we learned is that they were complacent. They admit that they were complacent during the rulemaking process when those rules were originally adopted by a previous administration, and they would have adamantly opposed them then as well. The reason they didn't is we're talking about rules that were adopted during COVID. So everything was really kind of pushed through really fast without diligence. So in essence, when I'm asking you to rescind from the concurrence so that we can come back and concur with those Senate amendments to take out those 2 rules as we believe our clerks are right. So That's it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, to confuse everybody more, I just got this from, we had a whole script on rescind, but apparently that's inaccurate, or at least by the belief of our chief LSO staff. And so really, the question to rescind is a final action. So if we rescind on this, as the good chairman has asked us to do, then we will go back, we will rescind our position and revert to the Senate's position. And so it'll be one vote. We don't have to vote on a rescind. It's not like reconsideration. We don't vote on one and then vote on the other. It's just one vote. One vote, on an aye vote, we vote to rescind our position. A vote against will be to maintain the Senate's position. So well, the question is, should the House rescind its previous action in not concurring with the Senate amendments to House Bill 47? Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Ellamand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? 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 Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Warnock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? I'm sorry, Ottman? No. Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwaniter Dan? Zwaniter Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Davis? Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 34 aye, 28 no.
By your vote, the House has rescinded its previous action in not concurring in the Senate amendments to House Bill 47. It has passed the House. House Bill 47 has passed the House. All right. Looks like we have a joint conference committee report. We're at that order of business of consideration of joint conference committee reports. The first report for our consideration is Joint Conference Committee Report number 1 on Senate File 9. Is that Representative Larson Lloyd?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to move Joint Conference Committee number 1 to Senate File 9 and ask for your concurrence or for your adoption of this report. Folks, this is the bill that authorizes payment for services rendered by licensed pharmacists under Medicaid. You'll recall that it came into the it came with the standing committee amendment, which then had an abortion component to it. It was amended here on the floor on that component. We went over, met with the other side. We agreed to go back to the bill as it was originally intended, taking out any of those amendments and keeping the intent of the bill very simple, to allow pharmacists who provide services to eligible individuals to be reimbursed for their services. Again, I'd ask for adoption of the conference committee report.
We are voting on Joint Conference Committee number 1 to Senate File 9. A majority of the elected members is required to adopt the report. The chief clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Klauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermueller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
Aye.
Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 36 aye, 26 no.
By your vote, you have adopted Joint Conference Committee number 1 report to Senate File 9. All right, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, I believe.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House resolve itself into committee of the whole.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Motion carries. Representative Conrad.
All right, the committee of the whole, please come to order. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 97. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 97, sponsored by Senator Hicks. Education Trust Fund Transfer, an act relating to the Wyoming Education Trust Fund. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 97, Education Trust Fund Transfer. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. Where's your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move in the committee whole rise and report. It does so with the recommendation that Senate File 97 do pass. Now we'll turn the explanation of the bill and the amendment over to the good representative from the Southwest.
Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So Senate File 97, it cleans up some of our accounts. We had this education trust fund that was created in the mid-1990s. It's got $5 million in it that was funded from a pipeline easement settlement in about 1996. This money went in there. The interest has been used to fund innovation grants that school districts can apply for. So one of the problems with this fund has been that because it's just $5 million, the interest that it's earning is not very good. So consistent with some of our other discussions we've had, we want to get a higher return on investment. What we've done is to take this $5 million that's in this education trust fund and put it into the corpus of the Common School Permanent Land Fund. So the idea is instead of earning 1.5% interest, you'll earn 5%. That's the core of the bill. With respect to Standing Committee Amendment number 1, the question is, well, what happens with the program, this innovation grant program? So Standing Committee Amendment number 1, which if not moved, I would like to move, has what it does is it allows for schools to apply for, on a competitive basis, for innovation grants for career and technical education. So it's a real positive program. The committee thought that it'd be important to keep the program going, right? We'll just make more money on the investment. With that, I would stand for questions on Standing Committee Amendment number 1.
You've heard the motion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1. Is there any discussion on this amendment? Question being called. All those in favor of, question having been called, all those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment number 1, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. Motion has passed. All right. Is there any further discussion on the bill?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 97 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 97 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 148. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 148, sponsored by Senator Kinski. Preemption of local firearms regulation, an act relating to weapons. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations to whom is referred Senate File 148. Preemption of local firearms regulation. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stiff, Walters, Zwanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
All right, you've heard the reading of the bill. Where's your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move in the committee whole rise and report. It does so the recommendation of Senate File 148 do pass. Now I'll turn the explanation of the bill over to the good representative from Fremont County.
Are there any further discussions on the bill?
Yes, he turned it over to him.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the House. A number of years ago, we had, in 2 years, we were doing a lot of Second Amendment bills. One, we came in and we said it's really the responsibility of the state to oversee the purchase and transfer and delivery, taxation, all things related to firearms. And we've done that because within the state, we wanted conformity around the state. So we wanted everything regarding gun law to be consistent and not to have certain some parts of the state having ordinances that was, and then where you would be in compliance. For example, if you had a concealed weapon, go to the next town, there's an ordinance that said you couldn't do that. So we put in this regulation in 68401 the following year. We come in and we had, there was, and I can't remember who brought the bill, but it's entitled Wyoming Firearm Freedom Act, that said if you had a firearm or ammunition or accessories that was manufactured in Wyoming, stamped on the article, and it remained in Wyoming, that it would be exempt from all of the federal regulations. Well, when we put all of that in there, we had they're all in Article 4, and we said that the Wyoming Firearm Freedom Act included 401 through 406, which then really caused a problem with the Wyoming Firearm Freedom Act. And so that was the intent of this bill is to bifurcate that to allow the Wyoming Firearm Freedom Act to do what it was to preempt from any regulation while here, and then 401 being separate and allow the state to regulate the prohibition on firearms, weapons, and ammunition in the state. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd try to answer any other questions.
Is there any further questions on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas' motion that when a committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 148 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Senate File 148 is passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 123. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 123, sponsored by Senator Boner. Military Dependents, School Choice, an act relating to education. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred Senate File 123, Military Dependents, School Choice. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Berger, Brown, Nemec, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Pendergraft, Smith, Stivar, Wiley. Representative O'Hearn, Vice Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rise and report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 123 do pass. I further move the standing committee amendment, and I will turn the explanation over to the good vice chair of your committee number 8.
Mr. Vice Chair O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A real easy bill. The amendment, all it does is takes out the deletion of the state, if the school is overcrowded. So what this bill does is for active duty military, they can move their children within the public school district if they're having problems with one school, move it to a similar school in the same district. If they have had problems and they've mentioned that to the EEO officer, the Equal Opportunity Officer on base or on the post. So it's a real easy bill. If the parents or the guardians of a student have had problems with one school, they can move it to they can move that child to a different school. I'll stand for questions.
Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, question have been called. All those in favor of standing committee amendment number 1, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We're now back on the bill.
Seeing no one, I call for the question.
All right, question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas, favor of Chairman Brown, motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with recommendation that Senate File 123 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All right. Senate File 123 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 131. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 131, sponsored by Senator Hutchings. Prohibition on delivery of unsolicited ballot forms, an act relating to elections. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred Senate File 131 engrossed. Prohibition on delivery of unsolicited ballot forms. Respect the report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Chadwick, Warnock, Penn, Trujillo, Ward, Swanitzer. Noes, Representatives Clauston, O'Hearn, Yen. Representative Swanitzer, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Swanitzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move in the committee of the whole rise to report it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 131 do pass. I would further move the standing committee amendment. And if I could just knock that out now, part of the bill says the county clerks or the Secretary of State. Standing committee amendment just adds or their designees. So it doesn't actually have to be the actual Secretary of State or the actual county clerk because there are election officials in both of those respective organizations. And I don't think it's controversial. So I'd ask for your aye vote in the standing committee amendment number 1 at this time.
All right, question has been called. All those in favor of Standing Committee number 1, say aye. Opposed, no. All right, we are now back on the Committee of the Whole number Senate File 131.
And turn over floor management of the bill to the good representative from District 61.
Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Senate File 131, and I ask for your favorable consideration. Senate File 131 is a short and simple piece of legislation. It prohibits a person from distributing unsolicited absentee ballot request forms. Unless requested to do so by a qualified elector, no person except a county clerk, the Secretary of State, or their designee shall distribute an absentee ballot request form by mail, email, or any other means which claim to be an official election document to any qualified elector. This clarifies that someone can only get an absentee ballot request form from the state itself. This protects our most vulnerable citizens by clarifying what people can and cannot distribute. This bill accommodates those good citizens who would wish to educate their peers with simple language, who can still create educational materials concerning absentee ballot request forms. They just cannot distribute the forms themselves. No groups can come into a group setting, that is a church or a nursing home or any other group setting, and hand out absentee ballot request forms. They can educate people about them, tell them where to get them, but no handing out the document itself to individuals who may have requested it. It should be the individual person themselves. It does not make it illegal for a friend to say, hey, it is time to vote. You need to request an absentee ballot. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the state, not third parties, to educate the citizenry about absentee ballot request forms. And for that, I would cite statute 22-9-101, which says the state and county selective service boards, all military organizations, the adjacent the adjutant general, citizens and officers of this state are charged with the duty of cooperation with election officials and absent electors to assist absent qualified electors to vote in all elections. And with that, I stand for questions. Thank you.
Discussion? Representative Sonderser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1. This was a cleanup brought to us from our good elections office downstairs. If you read the sentence, it starts with a qualified elector and ends with a qualified elector. And so this just deletes the first 7 words on that first line that says unless requested by a qualified elector, since the preposition of the sentence says a qualified elector. It's just a cleanup that our number 2 official caught and wanted removed from the statute to make it clear.
Thank you, Representative Wanitzer. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Question has been called. All those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1, say aye. Opposed, no. All right, the Committee of the Whole number 1 has passed. We're now back on the bill. Is there any discussion on the bill? Question having been called, all those in favor of Chairman Wanitzer's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 131 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 131 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 129. The reading clerk will now please read the bill.
Senate File 129, sponsored by Senator Landon. Background checks, Governor's Office, an act relating to criminal history records. Mr. Speaker, your Committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 129 engrossed. Background checks, Governor's Office, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Chestick, Crago, Haroldson, Nemec, Oakley, Provenza, Rodriguez-Williams, Washit. Noes, Representative Jennings. Representative Washit, Chairman.
All right, you've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Representative? Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a recommendation that Senate File 129 do pass, and I'll explain the bill. Members, 129 is a fairly simple Senate file. What it provides for is the authorization for the Governor's Office to have
thorough background checks done on prospective employees, interns, and others working in the governor's office. The vast majority of people who are brought in to work in that office are people known to the executive. And so there's a certain comfort level with their employment. But increasingly, we're bringing in interns and some other people who are not as familiar with the chief executive. And so what this bill allows is for a formal background check with fingerprinting to be done to verify that the individuals who are being brought into that office where a fair amount of confidential information is handled are people whom can be trusted with that responsibility. Nothing more complex than that. I ask for your aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Washup's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that House Bill 129 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 129 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 137. The reading clerk will now please read the bill.
Senate File 137, sponsored by Senator Steinmetz. Subdivisions, fencing requirements, an act relating to planning and zoning. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 137 engrossed, subdivisions, fencing requirements, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass. Ayes, Representatives Alaman, Allred, Banks, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Slagle, Winter. Representative Eklund, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Eklund?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 137 do pass, and I'll turn the explanation over to my vice chairman from the land of the buffalo.
Representative Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bring to you Senate File 137 and ask for your favorable consideration. Senate File 137 has to do with fencing, perimeter fencing around subdivisions. And what the bill is really trying to address is a problem where subdivision goes up, it's out in the middle of agricultural property, farming, ranching country. And as the current law reads, the subdivider can build any sort of fence they want. They're required to build any sort of fence. They're required to build some sort of fence. And once they do that, the agricultural producer that is surrounding them has to pay for half the cost. And that's created a lot of issues because oftentimes the fences that are built around subdivisions aren't the fences we think of for ag purposes, barbed wire, buck and rail, et cetera. And so what this bill does is clarifies that cost is actually going to be on the subdivider. They're going to be responsible for the cost of that fence. And then we repeal, if you go to the end of the bill, we just repeal the old law that refers back to, and I can't remember how long ago that was put in. It was not that long ago, actually. It's 1128-106B. And so we're just saying the farm and ranch people aren't responsible for half the fence. It's going to be up to the subdivider at that point, and it's part of the subdivision process. And that's actually kind of the meat of the bill. It goes into the Title 18 and the subdivision statutes and talks about how you have to get approval and provide a plan to your county planner when you're doing your subdivisions. And so it's a lot of words, but that's essentially what it does. And so I'd stand for any questions.
Is there any further discussion on the bill? Representative Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. I happen to live in a subdivision where barbed wire is restricted. And so how do we handle that? Are we forcing the developer to put in concrete fence, et cetera? My other question is a subdivider wants to put in a subdivision next to a bison ranch. And I think technically bison are livestock in the state of Wyoming. And I would suggest the composition of the barbed wire fence would not be enough to hold those animals in. So if you have some solutions for those two problems, I would be most interested in hearing. Thank you.
Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to answer a couple of those questions, there's actually provision you can, as the subdivider, can build whatever type of fence you want. It just has to meet a minimum requirement, which is the lawful fence requirement that's already in statute. And so you don't, for example, if you have bison next to you and you're next to your subdivision, you don't have to necessarily build a bison-proof fence. You have to just build one of the fences outlined, the minimum requirement within the bill, which is just echoing what's already in the lawful fence in Title 11.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, a legal question. It's my understanding that in Wyoming, if you build a fence, the responsibility that you're assuming is to keep animals, critters out of your place, and that there's no obligation on the owner of the livestock to keep that there. Do I understand that correct? And then how would that apply to bison, for example? Thank you.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't like this bill at all, but I'm trying to find some pieces in here that I can live with. And I guess the biggest portion that I'm really, really concerned with is how prescriptive we are in this particular bill about the building and the materials used and how deep it has to go. And I guess, so my first question is what's the enforceability? Is this going to be enforced by our county regulators when they do this? Are they going to be out checking fence posts to make sure that they're 22 inches deep and that we have 2 spans of barbed wire within a wooden rail on top, and that wooden posts shall be at least 4 inches in diameter? Like really? Is that what we're going to put into statute? So that's my first issue. And then if you keep on reading, the other portion that I'm really not quite understanding is we're going to tell a subdivider that they have to put up a fence, and that if the cattle come through that fence and decide somehow or another to push that fence over and come into the subdivision, if you go to page 4 and lines 4 and 5 say the subdivider shall be responsible for all construction of the cost on the perimeter fence. But then we continue even further down and it says the adjoining landowner shall not be liable for any damages caused by or arising from livestock pastured on the adjoining land that may wander onto the subdivided land. Are we just like completely negating private property rights of the people in the subdivision at this point? Because that's how I read it, that we're going to force you to pay for this fence because, let's face it, this is going to cost the homeowners of that particular subdivision. The developer's not going to eat that cost. So we're going to tell them they have to pay for this fencing project. And then if it gets broken down, if the wind blows it over, if anything like that happens and a cow comes through and tears up my flower bed or starts nibbling on my trees or whatever the case may be, I'm liable for that? I don't agree with that. So I'm hearing yes from my cattle ranchers, which is unsurprising whatsoever. So I'm really, really concerned with this particular bill. If it makes it through committee of the whole, I can promise you I will be trying to clean up a lot of this. But I think my biggest question at this point is, how is this going to be enforced? And do we have the enforceability mechanisms in place, or are we going to be asked by the counties to hire more supervisors to come out and inspect this kind of stuff when it comes out? So on and against the bill as it stands.
Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to answer the last two speakers, because I think we can do it, together, Wyoming's a fence-out state, so that's already the law. We're not changing the law on who's liable for the animals that go through the fence. As far as the question regarding what type of fence, if you open your green books to 1128-102, the language that is in this bill is in 1128-102. And so what we were doing to make it clear is just moving the lawful fence language within the subdivision rules and set forth in this statute so that people don't have to go look for the lawful fence. We're just putting it right in there and making it clear that that's what a lawful fence is. That's not new language. That's not prescriptive language. It's already in the Green Book.
Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Couple questions. One is, on the kinds of fences that can be constructed, which starts on page 2, goes over to page 3, and to the top of page 4, would it be a friendly amendment to add the word "or" after Roman C? Because right now there's no "or," so it by rules of statutory construction, it means that your fence has to be all of those things. So I would imagine that'd be a friendly amendment, but my other question more substantively is this. What's a bit striking about this is that for subdivisions built, say, in a mule deer migration corridor, the first 3 kinds of fences are very wildlife unfriendly. You know, if you've got a mule deer migration corridor, you don't want to have your top wire be a barbed wire. You want the top wire to be smooth. You also don't want, between the top wire and the second wire, you don't want it to be just 15 inches. You want it to be about 16. And then you also want the bottom wire to be about 16 inches above the ground so that the antelope can get underneath, deer go over the top. So my question is, in committee, was there any discussion about encouraging wildlife-friendly fencing, or was there just no discussion of that? I mean, it does look like, by the way this is drafted, that it doesn't prohibit wildlife-friendly fencing, so I get that. But was there any discussion of trying to, encourage wildlife fencing, animal-friendly fencing where appropriate? Thank you.
Representative Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to answer the question about a friendly amendment, I don't think it hurts the bill, but if you look on page 2, lines 13 or 14, it says any one of the following. So A through D qualify as one of the fences that you can use. So I don't know if "or" is necessary, but I also wouldn't see it as an unfriendly amendment. As far as the question regarding, did we talk about wildlife friendly fences, that really didn't come up, mostly because we knew that this was just sort of a replacement of language that was already codified, and so we weren't re-debating what was already in the green books.
Representative Zwaniter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so a lot of this is actually already in the statute, but what's not, what we haven't discussed, which really concerns me, you're deleting the 50-50 requirement that we currently hold, that, each side of the fence owner pays for half. But long-term, and what I think is really worrisome about this bill, is that only one party is responsible for maintaining that fence, really into perpetuity, the way I read it. And so it's, right now under the statute, you can, force your neighbor to pay half, you can get a civil action against them. And now we're just saying one party has to build the fence, has to maintain the fence, and if it ever gets dilapidated to the point where animals can cross it, it's all on that subdivider or their heirs to maintain that fence at all times. And I just find that kind of unfair, 50 years down the road, on how these things might work to put that in. And if the bringer or defender of the bill can address what the long-term prospects is for a subdivider to have to permanently maintain a fence on their own accord in the future.
Representative Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a good question. And one of the things we talked about is, if we were talking a simple wire fence, I don't think the 50-50 or the maintenance going forward is a problem. What we're talking about is if the subdivider decides to build, and we've all seen these, a 10-foot concrete fence around the entire perimeter of their subdivision, and it's in the middle of the ranch or farm that we're talking about, the maintenance of that could be quite extensive. And so that's if moving on in other readings, we could figure out an amendment to address that, I'm happy to talk about that. And I think the committee would be, the sponsor would be, but that's the problem we were running into, is finding a delineation between what we consider an ag fence, wire, post and rail, whatever, and a 10-foot tall concrete fence that's around a fancy subdivision. And so that's the crux of the problem with that particular issue. I'm happy to work on amendments if we can figure out a way to get around that.
Representative Slagle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being on that committee, we heard a lot of testimony, and our biggest issue is these people moving in that have no clue about fences, and subdividers dividing this all up, and that's why the fence requirement cost was going to back to the subdivider and the people that bought that from them because a lot of them don't understand the current principles of fencing in Wyoming. And like good representative, our country lawyer said, it's the other fences that are high cost that the ranchers don't need to maintain. And so that was our decision on coming to that point as well. Thank you.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. To clear up a couple of these things, a lot of times these subdivisions occur next to a landowner that isn't selling his land. So this just protects the guy that is selling his land from the guy that isn't, you know? And then as far as the question about ownership of the fence and maintenance and things like that, if you've ever dealt with a BLM permit or something out there, it's assigned to that permit which side of the fence you maintain, you know, so those things do occur quite often out there. So, but I think it's a good idea to prevent the landowner from having to absorb this absorbent cost of a fence to keep his critters in and off your ground. And as far as a wildlife one, I don't know if that's the intent of the subdivision to have the deer in there to prune the trees and the flowers or not. So that may defeat that issue also.
Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Seems to me like this bill is trying to fit something into Wyoming that's a one-size-fit-all type of thing, where there might be some places in Wyoming where the round peg doesn't fit in the square hole. Here in this county, we have land use regulations. So the process for those land use regulations would be that the gentleman in charge of the county, the people in charge at the county level would go through and bring in a public hearing process. That public hearing process happens where there's public input, and they develop these land use regulations. It seems like that is where you would want to put something like this. If it works in this county, fine. If it works in your county, fine. If it doesn't work in another county, it seems like we need to leave that open. So it seems like that process that we have in place for those land use regulations would work in place of what we're trying to do here. Thank you.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the presenter of the bill, if he can clarify a couple of things for me on the fencing requirements for the state. I think generally we all understand the fence out concept, particularly outside the city limits, but then I think that changes somewhat oftentimes when you get inside a city limit where there may be an ordinance that's fenced in. So Farmer Brown has his milk cow, he's got a responsibility to keep that cow fenced in his property to keep from damaging other property. So the basis for that is in some of our, like my community, where there's still a little bit rural parcels within the city limits where there's a fence in requirement. If this goes into place, are these fence out requirements then going to be in place? And it seems to be a little bit of a conflict there. So if he can steer me in the right direction and on how that would work, or maybe city ordinance trumps, I don't know.
Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another good question. So because this is in Title 18 and it has to do with county subdivision regulations only, I don't think we'll have a conflict between this and municipal ordinances. Home rule takes the cake on that one, and they'll get to decide how they want to deal with the issue.
Representative Trujillo.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. This is a good bill. I say it's a yes. What I was trying to make a point and getting through my head is, once I lived in another state in the mountains, and I would hear new neighbors moving in, asking for new traps because we have wild animals on our porch. Well, this fence to me is asking pretty much like the same thing. However, these communities are moving into the farmlands and the ranch lands, And we have to remember that. So part of the maintenance for them would be to keep up their own fence because they're in their environment. When I was in the environment in the mountains, I would always tell my neighbors and my kids that, you know, we're in the wild animal kingdom. We live with the bears, they don't live with us. So we need to remember where we're putting these subdivisions, that they're the ones wanting to move into those lands, so it should be their responsibility to maintain the fences.
Representative Olman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I heard some, excuse me, heard some talk a little bit ago about property rights. What about the man who doesn't need that fence? Does he have rights? If you don't want your flowers mowed down, you need a fence. And the best way to have that fence would be the subdivider put it in before you ever bought the ground. When that fence was put in, you probably wouldn't even be the property owner because the fence would need to be put up before the subdivision was even built. So it's, you're taking rights away from one man and giving them to another man because the guy with the cows don't need the fence. It's the people who are in the subdivision that needs the fence. Thank you.
Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have several different questions about this bill. But it seems to me it's a little bit unique in that if you have two farmers that are side by side, then we know what the law is and how that's supposed to work. But now all of a sudden, if you have a subdivider next to you, then we're adding additional burdens onto the subdivider that don't otherwise exist. But my guess is that 50 to 60% of all the fences in Wyoming do not fit the definition of a legal fence. I mean, all you have to do is go down any county road anywhere, and I can tell you they don't fit that definition, and never have and never will. And now we're requiring whoever comes in and does any type of subdivision to have a fence that's going to be better and nicer, and the sole responsibility of the subdivider just because he's a subdivider. So there are also, the suggestion is that subdivisions are all on vacant land. On one side you got cattle, and on one side you don't. Well, that's not the case. There's lots of situations. For example, if you're subdividing timber property where you specifically do not want fences. In fact, sometimes that's within the covenants, because I've drafted those type of covenants before. You do not want fences, and now this is mandating fences where they don't want fences. If you're bordering a national forest, or if you're bordering some other type of locations, all you have to do is walk around the corner, because if you don't want a fence on one side, now you have to have a fence on the other side. So, and then on the cost sharing liability, I think that has to be addressed by an amendment, and it's critical. It's a critical path for this, because the cost of and maintenance of a fence can be exorbitant, particularly if it's a large fence. And now if you got to put a better fence in than already existed, and the subdivider has to fit the whole bill, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. So, I mean, it's a large hurdle to cross, and to me, there's just so many situations where this doesn't fit. So, we'll be happy to try to work on this a little bit, but not too hard, because it's not that great of a bill. Thanks.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take just a second and go back to my last question, because part of that was not answered. And when I asked about bison, I asked about that for a specific reason. West of the town where I live is a private bison herd that has been there for many, many years. And yet there are a lot of new subdivisions going up all around that area. And so in the case where the subdivision goes up against an existing bison ranch, the fence that you describe may or may not be adequate to keep those animals out. We've established this is a fence out state. Are we, by describing the fence in this kind of detail, are we boxing ourselves in? Are we, as was mentioned earlier, making a one size fits all? And is that an issue? Thank you.
Representative, I want to remind everyone at this time that do not pass judgment on the validity and/or the goodness of the badness, for lack of a better word, of the bill. So please do not provide judgment on the respective bills. Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So on this bill, whether the bill is a good bill or not a good bill, that's a judgment, right? We don't want to do that sort of thing at the mic. But what I will say is this is an issue. If you've ever been around any of our communities, and if you've ever been around subdivisions that come and go, nobody accepts responsibility for the fence, and then they automatically assume that it's your animals that are destroying their garden when they have a fence that's completely down. And oh, by the way, you should always be the one that puts that fence up. That's unrealistic. It's unrealistic. Now, I don't know whether the bill's written the best in the world, if there's challenges, but I can tell you this is an issue and that we ought to work on it. Like I said, I don't know if this is the best bill or not, but it is an issue that needs worked on, and it's not a joking matter. I've seen these subdivisions go for 30 years and nobody knew the original covenants, and then there's the fence that's laying on the ground, and the livestock guy next to it is assumed to have to take care of all the fence. That's not what our Wyoming law says. It's a fence out state. Even taking half of it is reasonable because that's in the law today. If you read it, that's in the law. So how do we, this is, I think, a lot of trying to belt and suspenders around our subdivision law to conform with the rest of our fence laws. And so I would urge you to take a look at the bill. If we need to fix it, let's fix it, but the issue's not going away. Thank you.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree. This certainly is an issue, and I actually had a property that was right up against an open pasture where they ran cattle as well. And I was lucky enough that the person who did the subdivision actually did put one up, and I knew that I was responsible for it. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about somebody else who's going to be building a brand new subdivision, is going to be tacking on another price to them. And let's be real, these are not cheap fences either. When we sit here and we look at these, and as the good Vice Chair of Appropriations was saying, if we get them to build it lawfully, and again, I don't know that I did hear whether or not this is going to be enforced by the county. And if it's enforced by the county, what they're going to need, whether this is an HOA issue. But one of my next questions here is I really do appreciate the country lawyer referring me to the 1128-102. I really do appreciate that. But I kept reading, and I went to 1128-108, which is liability for breach into a lawful enclosure by animal, civil action, or arbitration. And so my question for this particular bill is, if I have a fence on all sides of my property, does my property now become a lawful enclosure? And therefore, if your cattle comes onto my property, I have respite when it comes to 1128-108. But the way that this particular law reads, I don't, because this law literally states the exact opposite. And so I'm questioning, should there be a notwithstanding, one of my favorite words that we put into legislation, that says notwithstanding 1128-108, your cattle can come onto my property and I can't do anything about it. The next thing that's very interesting on it is, if you keep going into some of the case law that was on this, I can hold your cattle for ransom until you pay for the damages. So are we going to go back to that? Because I think what we're really getting into at this point, I see some of the cattle ranchers shaking their heads, they understand this. We're talking about something when the entire state was owned by cattle ranchers, right? We were talking about fencing out from individual cattle ranchers. We're not all like that anymore, ladies and gentlemen. We have subdivisions being built into county pockets. And this is only going to increase the costs of building houses and building these new subdivisions, and it's only going to be borne by the people who are trying to move. So while I understand that the intent, and I agree with the speaker, this is a problem that we do need to address, I don't think this is the vehicle to do it. And if the body so chooses to move this forward, I will try to work this out and try to fix this, because I agree there's an issue here, but there's more issues if we pass this bill than I think that we have if we don't pass it.
Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple of good points brought up by the good chairman. So, and if you look on page 4, and I think that's the language the chairman's talking about, the adjoining landowner shall not be liable for any damages caused by or arising from livestock pastured on the adjoining land that may wander onto the subdivided land. I think that what that's trying to cover is the circumstance where there isn't a fence. I have no problem referencing back to 1128-108 within the bill if that's what we need to do to make it clear. Not a problem, because I don't think we're trying to take it outside of that realm. What we're saying is if there isn't a fence or you're not maintaining your fence properly, then it falls under that. I think that's the intent of the bill. We can address that with amendments as well if we need to.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have another question. I do know this is a big concern in my county. One farmer has about $9,000 request for fencing with all these subdivision plots, hobby farms up against their farm. My question is, if the farmer decided to build a fence and the subdivision wasn't required to, would the subdivision then be forced to pay the 50%? Is it a double standard if one party decided to build the fence and the other side did not? So,
Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just another point also where it's hard enough for developers, and then you want to subdivide a piece of land, you have a developer come in that wants to subdivide a piece of land. It's hard enough for them to be able to decipher the land use regulations that are in place. Now we're asking them to understand the nuances of our green book as well. So there's some difficulty there with, understanding that they're going to conform to everything that we're placing on them, all the burden that we're going to throw on their shoulders.
Representative Olamand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The little town that I went to school at for 12 years is open range today, and the garbage cans are tipped over by the cows. There's cow chips laying in the streets and on the sidewalks. These places need fenced out, and it should not be the result of the rancher to have to do that, because he doesn't need the fence. It's the people living in that town that needs the fence. Thank you.
Majority Floor Leader Nyman.
I'm trying to stay out of this mix because this is actually a good piece of legislation, but it actually does need some work on it. What you're dealing with, folks, is a property boundary. And property boundaries in state statute are clearly established as what a basic property fence line looks like, and that's the determination. And that's the reason that's there is so that if you go to a civil court, you just build some scabbed in nasty thing not on the line or whatever, you're talking about a need for a certain, did I just cross the line? Oh, thank God. So, you need a survey, needs to be on the line, that has a determination in this. If somebody comes in and builds a piece of fence, they've sold that piece of property. In Wyoming statute right now, you are both responsible for half of the property line fence cost on a property line. And that cost is clearly delineated in the green books as to what a true property boundary fence is. The issue that we're dealing with, and I've dealt with it, I've got a subdivision in the middle of my property, it's old. If somebody comes in and decides that they want to put up a vinyl fence and really beautify their yard, and it's right on the property line, this is saying that I'm not responsible to put in a vinyl fence or pay for half of it. But what we can do in this particular piece of legislation is we can come back to the landowner that is the adjacent property owner and say, what is the value or the cost of a standard statutorily described fence? Would be my suggestion. And say, you're responsible for that amount of money. You can easily get that information put together. But if you so choose to try to beautify your yard, please don't make me pay for half of it. And that's what this is trying to do, because many people are coming in and they're building an edifice of a fence around their new subdivision, and they're saying that now you're responsible for half of it. when really we're not. The state law is quite clear on that. To answer the question again, and the good bringer has explained it, if our livestock get in and damage your property, yes, there are laws on the books that will require that I get in there and I take care of that. I have to go back and I have to, if they do some damage, but there's some things that we do. If it's consistently happening, yes. But if you make an earnest effort that if somebody says, hey, your cows are eating my begonias, get your hind end up here and get them out of here, and you don't, or you don't repair that fence, then you're in bigger trouble. But this is a good piece of legislation. It's trying to answer some major issues that we're facing as a state, and we know it's happening all over. But what we've got to do is clarify what a state statute fence is, the requirement for the property line. And then if you want to build something nicer than that, please do. But that landowner on the other side of that fence should only be responsible for what a statutory fence is. And then they will have to maintain that. So that would be my suggestion.
Is there any further discussion on the bill? Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the bringer of the bill, I've got just one question. We've talked about cows. What about sheep? Sheep's a different fence.
Is there any further discussion on this bill? All right, question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Eklund's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 137 do pass. All of those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 137 is passed committee of the whole. Next bill for our consideration. Nope. Retract that.
You're on.
Senate, all right, the next bill for our consideration is Senate File 075. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 75, sponsored by Blockchain, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations Amendments, an act relating to corporations. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 75, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations Amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Chadwick, Haroldson, Harshman, Knapp, Newsom, Olson, Ottman, Wiley, Yen. Representative Olson, Chairman.
You've heard of the reading of the bill. Where's your pleasure, Chairman Olson?
Thank you. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, that it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 75 do pass. There are no amendments, and I will go as quickly as I can to explain this bill. It really is a straightforward bill. A few sessions back, we adopted legislation to create a supplement in our Limited Liability Company Act for the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, the DAO. We came back after creating the supplement and made some changes to that statute in order to get it into a place where we wanted it initially. And now we're coming back again with just two changes to this statute. And it's directed, we're directed to make these changes by the office that oversees the compliance of our businesses. Previous administration, we had worked during the interim, this is an interim bill, with the Secretary's office to address the issue of a publicly available identifier. So a DAO is required to have one, and it's required to have one posted in its articles when it files for creation. Two problems occurred. One occurred when somebody didn't post whatever the publicly available identifier was, and two, the second problem occurred when they would change their publicly available identifier. So all this bill does is answer the first question of what is a publicly available identifier. We put it into statute that it means an address that's available publicly and that identifies a smart contract and may include a uniform resource locator, contact address, or other similar reference. So what does that mean? It means very simply that when you create a DAO, one of your articles that you publish has to contain a website address that points to your smart contract or an address in the blockchain. That's it. And then the second thing this bill does is it says that if you change your publicly available identifier, so you make a change to that on the blockchain or the web address, whichever one, you have to go back and amend your articles So this is all about accountability, transparency, and that's it. So ask for your aye vote.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Olson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 137 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Olson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it does so with the recommendation that Senate File 75 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Senate File 75 has passed the committee of the whole. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee of the whole rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The motion carries.
The reading clerk will please read the committee of the whole report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 97, do pass amended. Senate File 148, do pass. Senate File 123, do pass amended. Senate File 131, do pass amended. Senate File 129, do pass. Senate File 137, do pass. Senate File 75, do pass. Representative Crago, Chairman. I'm sorry, Representative Conrad, Chairman. Sorry, sir.
Chairman Conrad.
I move the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion carries. Congratulations, Representative Conrad. All right, the House will please come to order. Reports from standing committees. Oh, do we have any messages? Well, let's do messages from the Senate first.
Message 374. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 104, Hunting of Predatory Animals Amendments. The Senate adopted the Joint Conference Committee Number 1 report on the bill listed above by the vote indicated. Ayes 27, noes 4. Message 375. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 42, Off-Road Recreational Vehicle Operation. Ayes 20, noes 11. Message 376. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 56, Purple Star Schools. Ayes 30, noes 1. Message 378. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 134, Alcohol Sales to Licensees. Ayes 27, conflict 4. Message 379. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 148, Airport Liquor Licenses Amendment. Ayes 20, noes 7, conflict 4. Message 380. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 279, Voter Identification Requirements. Ayes 31. Message 381. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 62, Open Banking. Ayes 16, noes 15. Message 382. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below failed to pass the Senate third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 83, Tribal Agreements to Hunt and Fish. Ayes 8, noes 23. Message 377. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 100, Acquisition Value Study. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 20, noes 11. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 384. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 229, Electronic Payment of Sales and Use Taxes. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 31. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Let's do reports from standing committees.
Senate File 67, sponsored by Senator Schuler. Multi-purpose vehicle, disabled license plates, an act relating to motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred Senate File 67 engrossed. Multi-purpose vehicles, disabled license plates. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Berger, Brown, Nemec, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Pendergraph, Smith, Stivar, Wiley. Representative Brown, Chairman. Senate File 141, sponsored by Senator Pappas. Transportation Technology Transfer Center Program Funding, an act relating to county roads. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred Senate File 141 engrossed. Transportation Technology Transfer Center Program Funding. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Berger, Brown, Nemec, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Wiley. Noes, Representatives Pendergraph, Smith, Stivar. Representative Brown, Chairman.
Re-referrals, Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to re-refer Senate File 141 to your committee number 2 appropriations, please.
Without objection, Senate File 141 is re-referred to Committee Number 2 Appropriations. Chief, does that clear the deck? Oh, we got lots of enrolled acts, that's right. Okay. All right, we are at that order of business. Of signing of enrolled acts, are you going to need a moment? All right. All right, the first enrolled act for our consideration is Enrolled Act number 35. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Enrolled Act 35 being original House Bill 21, an act relating to state lands, requiring an applicant to have actual and necessary use of state lands to be qualified to lease state lands, making conforming amendments and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 35, being original House Bill 21. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 36.
House Enrolled Act 36 being original House Bill 65. An act relating to suicide prevention, establishing the 988 system for suicide prevention and mental health crisis, providing requirements for the 988 system, establishing duties of the Departments of Health, providing rulemaking authority, providing for an advisory board, establishing the 988 trust fund and a related reserve account, providing for allocation of funds within and between the accounts, specifying immunity for telecommunications providers, specifying confidentiality of information, providing for implementation of the act, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 36, being original House Bill 65. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 38. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act 38, being original House Bill 31, an act relating to education, authorizing a Board of Cooperative Educational Services to act as a local education agency for the purpose of applying for and receiving state and federal grants, authorizing rulemaking, making conforming amendments, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 38, being original House Bill 31. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 39. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act 39, being original House Bill 174, an act relating to the Code of Civil Procedure, increasing the limit on the value of the homestead applicable to the homestead exemption, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 39, being original House Bill 174. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Andrew. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Enrolled Act number 40. The reading clerk will please read the enrolled act.
Enrolled Act 40, being original House Bill 27, an act relating to the Consolidated School Facility Remediation Schedule for Public Schools, eliminating the Consolidated Remediation Index and associated rulemaking authority, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 40, being original House Bill number 27. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 41. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Enrolled Act 41, being original House Bill 127, an act relating to public health and safety, requiring healthcare facilities to allow clergy members to visit healthcare facilities as specified, providing definitions and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 41, being original House Bill 127. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Angelos. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 42. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Enrolled Act number 42, being original House Bill 44, an act relating to highways, providing for the Transportation Commission to use alternate contracting methods as specified, requiring rulemaking and providing for effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 42, being original House Bill 44. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 43. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Enrolled Act 43, being original House Bill 165, an act relating to insurance, prohibiting discrimination against living organ donors by certain insurers, providing definitions, specifying applicability, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 43, being original House Bill 165. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative O'Hearn. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 44. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act 44, being original House Bill 7, an act relating to domestic relations, amending the minimum marriageable age, specifying that marriages involving persons under age 16 are void, making conforming amendments, specifying applicability, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 44, being original House Bill number 7. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Zwanitzer Dan. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 45. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Enrolled Act 45, being original House Bill 96, an act relating to insurance and probate, requiring the extension of insurance coverage applicable to a property under a transfer on death deed as specified, requiring notice of and coverage for a grace period before termination of insurance coverage, specifying applicability and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 45, being original House Bill 96. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Craigo. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 46. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Enrolled Act 46, being original House Bill 279, an act relating to elections, requiring that acceptable voter identification be presented for a voter to obtain an absentee ballot in person, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign House Enrolled Act number 46, being original House Bill 279. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Knapp. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 47. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Enrolled Act 47, being original House Bill 148, an act relating to alcoholic beverages, specifying where alcoholic beverages may be sold under a retail liquor license in a commercial airport, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 47, being original House Bill 148. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Walters. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 48. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Enrolled Act 40, House Enrolled Act 48, being original House Bill 134, an act relating to alcohol, specifying that a licensee may purchase alcoholic beverages from a retail licensee or a manufacturer, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 48, being original House Bill number 134. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Nemec. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 49. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act number 49, being original House Bill 62, an act relating to banking, authorizing state chartered banks to participate in open banking as specified, providing definitions, requiring rulemaking, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 49, being original House Bill 62. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 50. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act number 50, being original House Bill 56, an act relating to education, providing for the designation of Purple Star schools that take specific action to assist military-connected students, specifying requirements for Purple Star schools, providing rulemaking authority, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act number 50, being original House Bill 56. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Brown. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act number 51. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act Number 51, being original House Bill 42, an act relating to motor vehicles, specifying requirements for operating an off-road recreational vehicle near an interstate, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act Number 51, being original House Bill Number 42. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is House Enrolled Act Number 52. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act Number 52, being original House Bill 104, an act relating to game and fish, allowing for the use of artificial light, including thermal or infrared imaging or other imaging outside the normal visible light spectrum while hunting predatory animals at night, making conforming amendments, requiring rulemaking, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign House Enrolled Act Number 52, being original House Bill Number 104. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Harrelson. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act Number 37. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 37, being original Senate File 71, an act relating to state public purpose investments, decreasing maximum limits for loan amounts and amending terms, rates, and conditions for farm loans, infrastructure project loans, and street and road project loans, striking provisions related to the investment of permanent funds in community college district bonds, prohibiting new state loan and investment board loans under the Wyoming Joint Powers Act, and student dormitory loans as specified, repealing the limit on funds available for beginning agriculture producer farm loans, specifying applicability, requiring reports, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act Number 37, being original House Bill Number 71. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act Number 38. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 38, being original Senate File 43, an act relating to improvement and service districts, providing an alternative proceeding to form a district to provide emergency medical services by resolution of a board of county commissioners, specifying the appointment of the board of directors of the district, specifying taxation requirements, requiring the board of directors for an emergency medical services district to attempt to collect for services rendered as specified, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act Number 38, being original Senate File Number 43. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act Number 39. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 39, being original Senate File 10, an act relating to professions and occupations, entering into a compact with other states to allow licensed professional counselors licensed in one compact state to exercise the multi-state licensure privilege in other states that are party to the compact, retaining authority to license counselors only in Wyoming, approving and specifying terms of the compact, making conforming amendments, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act Number 39, being original Senate File Number 10. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act Number 40. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act. Senate Enrolled Act Number 40.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 40, being original Senate File 37, an act relating to the Medical Assistance and Services Act, authorizing payment for services rendered by a licensed podiatrist under the Medical Assistance Services Act as specified, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Senate Enrolled Act Number 40, being original Senate File Number 37. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act number 41. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 41, being original Senate File 29, an act relating to agriculture, livestock, and other animals, amending the requirement to distinctly brand a livestock animal following a positive brucellosis test to be discretionary, updating the provisions for the brucellosis testing of cattle, modifying the documentation requirements to receive compensation for brucellosis testing, requiring rulemaking and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 41, being original Senate File number 29. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act number 42. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 42, being original Senate File 95, an act relating to legal time and holidays, designating Moon Landing Day as a state-recognized commemorative day to be observed as specified, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 42, being original Senate File number 95. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act number 43. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 43, being original Senate File 65, an act relating to vital records, repealing the compensation paid to local registrars for the registration of records, requiring all payments and fees for the registration of records that are due to be paid, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 43, being original Senate File number 65. I have so signed. The next enrolled act for our consideration is Senate Enrolled Act number 44. The reading clerk will read the enrolled act.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 44, being original Senate File 58, an act relating to state lands, designating Sutton Archaeological Site as a state archaeological site, requiring the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources to manage the Sutton Archaeological Site, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 44, being original Senate File number 58. I have so signed. Does that clear the deck? All right, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Wednesday, the 22nd day of February, 2023.
Committee announcements. Committee announcements. Any committee announcements? Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 7, House Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, the 22nd, upon noon recess to consider 2 bills, Senate File 153, Election Security, and Senate File 164, Public Improvement Contract Requirement Amendments.
Chairman Northrup.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 3 for Education will meet upon Wednesday at noon adjournment. We're going to do Senate File 83, which is K-12 school facility leasing. Senate File 174, Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board, will also start into Senate File 133, K-12 education program. Oh, I'm sorry. That is the student eligibility in interscholastic sports. And then do 132, which is study of K-12 education program.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thanks. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, will meet tomorrow at 8:30 in House 3 to hear Senate File 147, Government Labor Contracts.
Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in our regular room. Try and get through 4 bills, Senate File 181, Senate File 99, Senate File 108, and Senate File 80.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Appropriations will meet in 10 minutes to hear Senate File 159, Senate File 172, and Senate File 144. Tomorrow at noon recess, we will hear Senate File 142 and the re-referral of Senate File 141. And tomorrow on adjournment, we'll have Senate File 146 tomorrow.
All right. Sounds like it. You have heard the majority floor leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion carries. The House will stand at, the House will be adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, February 22nd, 2023.